All right, we're recording. Jeff, thanks for joining me. Jeff is a sales executive, consultant, writer, thinker, and among other things. And this whole thing started because we started talking about the best versions of some arguments. So we're going to try to have this conversation. This is the first time we've done this. And try to have this conversation about a tough topic where we try to steelman the argument. We give the best version of the argument, talk about what's coming maybe from the other side, because most of us have intuitions about a lot of things, whether it's work culture or management styles or product development strategies. We have an intuition that some things are right and some things are wrong. We're going to deal with these intuitions a little bit more deeply. So thanks for joining me for that. Let's have a good conversation about it.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. I appreciate the idea that we're having this conversation, because one of the things you and I always talked about, and thinking of you as a thinker and a leader of multiple different teams and a development executive as well as an operational executive, one of the things we've talked about is the idea of where do ideas work and when do they not. So it's the idea that no idea is good outside of context and no idea is bad outside of context. And I think that's really what I think is going to be entertaining as we work through this process, and maybe even make something that's fun to watch.
Maybe. All right. So the question that started this all was, we were having a conversation about whether or not it's ever a good idea to ask your employees to work overtime, right? You and I have been in the same room in board meetings where well-meaning executives and board members have asked, in the face of a real problem, a real crisis, they've asked if perhaps the solution is people need to work weekends for a couple months, or we need to be putting in 60 or 70 hours a week because that's what we do in crunch time. So talk to me a little bit about what you've seen, or where you think this kind of request for overtime and more work or more output comes from. What's happening in these boardrooms when they're talking about these things?
And I'll even take it, whether it's the boardroom or just any type of manager or leader, this is a throughput question. You and I use the word throughput, but really what's the outcome we're not getting now that we need to get? And you and I love the startup space, the get up and go space, if you will. And so when I think of the well-meaning side of this argument is, we're either running out of cash, we have a sale that came in, we have an opportunity that if we get there first, we're gonna win that opportunity. And then there's also, when you said crisis, it got my ears up, because crisis is easy to claim and hard to define. So I think when we talk about that word, we should talk about, hey, we're gonna run out of money in weeks, or we're looking down this stream and we're gonna miss an opportunity. I think that's the only version of well-meaning. Now, what we're going to choose not to talk about, because it's not the best version of the argument, is we just want to get more out of our people. We're paying them this much, we can work them this much, we can get more. We think we can get more out of them by working them longer, harder, stronger. So I don't want to, there is a caveat that some people try that. That is not the steelman. That's the weak version of the argument.
Yeah, and in fact, there are. I think the reason that a lot of employees or individual contributor roles are concerned about these types of requests is because in the past there have been a lot of bad faith actors in executive positions that treat their employees as fungible resources, and their mindset is, how do I get more? How do I optimize the time on task? How do I get them typing on the keyboard more hours of the day?
Yeah, I think you used a word there that I would take great offense to, because I don't even think that's what they think about. It's not how do I optimize the output. It's how do I maximize their hours?
How do I, yeah.
And I think the bad faith actors, and again, we're going to get off of this real quick. I think there's a difference in somebody, and again, if we're going to use the word crisis, we should define it. But the idea that the good faith actors who are in the boardroom, who are looking at something and making a reasonable request for overtime and extra hours, and these bad faith actors who are trying to maximize the use of a person.
Yeah.
And I refuse to allow optimize to be used there, because there's nothing about optimizing there. It's about,
fair enough. I think you're right.
Our use of that person.
So
let's get off of that.
Yeah, good. I think you're right. Let me throw some statistics at you. I looked up before we had this call, and I'll ask you the question kind of leading up to this, like what, if you can put yourself in a manager's shoes, then in the face of statistics like these, what are you thinking, or what would be the right message, the right narrative to go along with the request to work a significant amount of overtime? All right, so yeah, I'll start from the bad faith section first, and then we'll move over. But there was recently a survey, and it was from Fast Company, and I'll post the link wherever we post this. A survey that asked people how much they were working while they were working remotely during the pandemic, and a third of people, 1/3 of people, said that they worked 3 to 4 hours a day. And only about only about 15% of people said that they work 7 or 8 hours a day.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm gonna question whether Fast Company did that study and actually made those calls, and who they asked and how long they had to take to get that number.
Well, let's just assume that it's correct. And and then there was a couple outlier folks that said things like, hey, I'm pretty much, except for a break to eat dinner or pick up my kids from school or something, I'm pretty much on from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. or even worse. There seems to be a specific thing happening at a couple tech companies like Amazon, where people kind of feel like they're on from 9 a.m. to midnight every day, with meetings across the globe and things like that. So there are some people that are working a ton of hours naturally. There's also, at least according to the survey, a lot of people that aren't or feel like they're only doing 4, 5, 6, 7 hours of work a day. So that's one side of the coin.
For the record, I think that's up from what they're doing work in the office most of the time.
Well, I think that, yeah, and I want your thoughts on this. Like, when people report how many hours they work, what are they actually reporting? Because if I'm commuting to the office, I'm reporting a different number than if I'm walking across my house. Right?
All of the So I'm going to keep us in our box here of talking about good faith actors. And, when we talk about now the fact that remote work, whether managers and leaders like it or not, is going to become, it's here. It's not going away. And I know some recruiters that want to talk to your employees if you try to make it go away. But the reality here is the old school way of thought was evaluating work by how many hours went into it. And one of the things that I don't understand is that's been long dead in so many different areas as we evaluate work. But in thought work, and in whether it's sales, whether it's in software development, whether it's in these soft areas that require, and it's not as easy to measure one-to-one, I worked an hour, I outputted this many things. It's still, how many hours did you put on it?
Yeah. So let me give you the other stats then from the sales side of things, because one of the things that I find really interesting about this is you come from the sales side, I come from the product development side. We've both worked across departments and things, so we've seen different cultures and different team styles and things like that. So on the sales side, it's a much different story. Only 15% of salespeople, and this is from salespeople to managers to directors and VPs of sales, only 15% of salespeople report working under 40 hours a week. Right? And in fact, a full third of salespeople report working more than 60 hours a week.
I think, again, we have the operational definition of work comes to mind here, but it's also, you and I have talked about this for a long time. Sales might be the worst leadership and management left in our culture. They're still using methods and methodologies from the 70s and 80s and psychology that's long been debunked to manage their teams. And it's still generally accepted. So when it doesn't surprise me that to succeed in sales, somebody has to put in that many hours. Yeah. And it doesn't surprise me that in companies that they're asking their salespeople to put in that many hours. And I guess they have to do it to justify the huge commission checks that they write. And I do, one of the things though that I want to bring this back to the Steelman argument though, is when is that appropriate? When is it okay to ask a salesperson to work 60 hours? And first, let's be clear. None of
And
us
how
think.
and how would you make that ask? So let's go there. Like when under what circumstances would this be okay? If I reported this data, a third of your workforce is working 60 hours a week or more, when would you be okay with that? What must have happened beforehand in order for you to feel like this is a good thing?
Let's be clear. The responsibility of a leader slash manager, and I don't want to get into the debate whether leaders or managers, but if I'm responsible for other people and I am managing other people, it is my job to make sure that they have a reasonable life. It's my job. I take that on when I move up into leadership. And as far as I can impact that life, what we're talking about really is their work and how I'm developing them, coaching them, creating a successful environment for them, and then also the asks I make of them. So under that context of what I believe a leader and manager is, there's really three things that I want to cover in that area. One, if I'm making that ask, I have to acknowledge that the leadership team has let the employees down. Because if I'm asking someone to go above and beyond, that means as a leader or manager, I've done something wrong. It really is that simple.
Say more about that. Why do you root this in the company has let you down, but now we have to make this hard request?
Because there's an expectation in our current culture that these jobs should be done and can be done in a 40-hour work week. That's the social agreement we currently have. And if you're designing a job or you're leading a job that cannot get done under that social context, you have designed a poor job, or you are asking for a job that is above and beyond. And that to me means that you have done a poor job designing the work.
Sure.
And so that's the premise in which, now sometimes when we get to the Steelman argument and point two here, there are times and places where there is a crunch that you could have made a mistake. There is a crunch that says, man, this is the market coming in. There's a time and place where, hey, software development got behind and we've got to make up for it. Or like mistakes that happen outside of the realm of my control. And now I would say that's a leadership and management issue, and I should have been working and forecasting that ahead, but that's another story. But let's say that mistake happens. And that's why the premise is this is a mistake or a miscue by leadership. We should have seen that well in advance. Now,
I think that's important too, right? Because as somebody who's being asked to upend your life and put in more for a company, it's nice to know that the genesis of that isn't me, right? Or it isn't because I hadn't been working hard enough previously. It's that we live in this complex world where we can't perfectly predict everything, and steering the business and understanding that we have enough cash to pay for enough employees to meet our goals is a management issue, right? It's not an employee issue.
Yeah, and are those goals reasonable?
Yeah, exactly.
So when I think about that, when you're asking people to work overtime or extra or above and beyond, there's a couple criteria that it has to hit for me. One, there is a sense of urgency tied to this.
And it's communicated, right? It's not just, everybody widely knows why this has to occur right now.
And the urgency can't be because the CEO or the owner or whoever has, the shareholders, can't be because the answer can't be because I want it now. That just can't be. And so why is that sense of urgency? And you can look at things like, man, there's a market opportunity sitting in front of us. And there's a limited time frame to take advantage of that opportunity, whether it's disappearing because of a competitor, whether it's disappearing because the market is changing, but there's a limited time frame when this is available. Yep. And for that, I'd compare that to the tax accountants.
And that's probably the best reason for this, right? Like, hey team, we messed up. We didn't see this coming sooner. However, if we really bust our butts for 6 weeks or whatever, here's the opportunity in front of us.
That's exactly right. The second one is, oh shit, we poorly planned finances. We poorly planned, your burn rate. You poorly planned some type of financial horizon. And, in my case, whether I would say like, we need to bring in this cash and this revenue now, or we need to get enough on the books that the bank or the investors see it. We need this traction now because that's the only way we can get past that cash outlay.
So
And
a more burning platform situation.
Exactly. And with both of those, you have to voice it. You have to voice why, the sense of urgency. And then the thing that comes next is this is what we're going to do for you because you're doing this for us.
Yeah.
And I can't be more strong on this than I am. It can't be, well, you have shares of the company, therefore you should want to do this. Because most line level workers will never see the benefit of those shares. And so the idea that they get 100 shares here, 100 shares there, when there's so many outstanding shares, is just not all that relevant to them. And when they're at the bottom of the share waterfall, that's not a relevant reward.
Yeah, I think we see this a lot in startups, this idea that we're truly all in it together because we are technically on paper all in it together. But that's not really how any of our psychology works. People have a very hard time valuing the benefit of a piece of paper 8 years into the future that will only actually be valuable if a whole series of events goes just right and you're lucky.
Right?
And
those series of events, and you're lucky. And oh, by the way, when we sell to that first company, they don't water it down. And when we sell to that second company, you don't get your shares booted because of what they are.
Sure. Getting into the weeds there a little bit, but the opposite of that like if even if I had the ability to future value my time like that, which humans are just bad at, what I do have the ability to realize and live is missing dinner with my family tonight, or canceling my weekend trip next weekend because now I have to work overtime right now. So I would say, like, even if you think that these future carrots are carrots, and I would argue that they're not really, they're not in the equation really for people. But if they are, and you believe that and you want to make a case for it, that carrot has to be so outsized versus the suffering that you're going to impart upon your employees for missing weekends and family nights and things like
that. That is the context in the way you can ask it. Now I'm going to ask you why we should never ask it.
Yeah. So is there anything else we want to talk? Like, I do want to get into maybe what is my core thesis that we should never ask this. But is there any other kind of like steel manning the argument? Like, when would it be okay? There's a specific opportunity that we can get everybody excited for, or there's a burning platform that we're going to communicate and maybe get everybody scared about, but it's real and we have to act now. Is there any other reasons why this might be a thing that you have to do that you can think of?
One, I need to emphasize it again, that opportunity has to be time sensitive. I mean, it just has to be time sensitive, because you wouldn't have had a startup if there wasn't an opportunity. You wouldn't have a business if it wasn't an opportunity. You wouldn't be trying to grow a business if there wasn't an opportunity. The only time you can ask for above and beyond is when that opportunity is time sensitive.
Okay, I think I can get behind that. I think I can get behind that, right? If you can clearly identify, here's the opportunity in front of us. It has a real deadline, not an imaginary one, right? Like, it's unless we get this customer by May, they're going to go with our competitor, right? There's some real thing that's happening. Or we have a real burning platform. We're running out of money. Our biggest customer is going to churn at the end of the month. So if we don't find another one before that, we're going to be cash flow negative. Like, there's some real thing that has to happen.
Yeah, Erik. So before you give your thesis here, I want to put you in a role play so that you can tell me, start with why this is wrong.
Okay.
Erik, I don't know if you know this, but I've been a successful founder many times. By the way, guys, just to be clear, this is not me. I'm role playing. I've been a successful founder many times. I'm great at building businesses, and something me and all my leaders did when I first started my first business that was awesome and sold for hundreds of millions of dollars. So we worked weekends, we worked all the time, and everyone was expected to do that with us. Why are you not telling your team to put in 60, 70 hours worth a week? Erik, why aren't you asking them to work overtime?
Well, okay, that puts me on the spot a little bit, and I have multiple things that I want to talk about for hours, but let me give you the cliff notes. I think the first thing that pops into my head is, as soon as anybody's telling me a story about how this worked yesterday, I heavily discount the value of yesterday's philosophy, of yesterday's processes. Like, but might it have been a good idea in the 90s to work 24/7 on your .com? Yeah, it might have, up until a point. So sure. But now in today's product.
Before you move on, and I'm going to give you this back, if somebody can't explain to me the cause and effect on why that was important, I don't care about your experience.
Oh, true, right? Like if
cause and
you're not
effect applies,
right,
good. Tell me
right.
the cause and effect. If you can't tell me it, I do not care that this worked for you in the past.
That would be a better retort to that would be, hey, tell me why that worked for you, without saying that it worked because you worked weekends, right? Like, without circular logic. Tell me why it worked for you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm the articulate one here. I'm the sales guy.
And I think, but that's almost what I was going to say, is like, I acknowledge that many crazy strategies have worked for many companies in the past. A lot of times we hear about the success of those companies only because of survivorship bias. But all of that aside, I don't believe that people that are in high-tech sales roles like your network, or high-tech product development roles like my network, we're not want for opportunities here, right? We're not actually in a situation in 2022 where if somebody asks me to work 60 or 70 hours a week, unless I'm super passionate about it, or I'm getting paid way more money than I think I'm worth, there's just no reason to have that lifestyle. We have almost infinite job opportunities, and people in product development and high-tech sales have almost infinite job possibilities. You're going to you're going to create turnover, and more importantly, you're going to create a story, a narrative, that the turnover is because people are overworked. And now think about how hard it's going to be to interview in the world of.
I need to cut in here, because you know what? That's not my narrative. We're not succeeding because you're not working hard enough.
See, that kind of stuff just like stops me in my tracks, right?
But we both heard it.
I know I have a personal feeling of like, what do you like? This doesn't even make sense. Why is the blame coming down to product? There's so many things going on here.
By the way, it's the same thing I've heard on the other side. If you just get your guys calling more, if you just get us in front of more people.
So yeah, and I think both of these things, both on sales and on product development, it comes down to this idea that a lot of people have, that more time on task equals better outcomes. And one of the interesting things, especially in that survey data that I sent you, that I found interesting, is it seems like when product folks report how much they work, they are reporting time on keyboard. And they're forgetting about conversations like this that I consider work, because I'm developing ideas and testing ideas and all of these kinds of things. They forget about the conversations with friends over a meal, or with their spouse in the morning, or before they go to bed, or something like all of the things that you think of during all of the other hours of the day. And the fact that the time that I spend at my keyboard spilling out these ideas isn't the only time that counts as work.
And I think that's an interesting part of the conversation, because what you're also talking about now, against the stupid argument I just gave, and a stupid argument that, by the way, the further you get away from the work, the more you're in the boardroom and less doing work, the more that argument makes sense.
Yeah.
But what you just described is they forget all of that other work. And I would actually say, and I'm once you get past a mechanical thing that is routine, and you're doing the same movement every time to get the same output, which is neither of our work, which is that sales job doesn't exist anymore. And that product development job doesn't exist anymore, because those things are automated these days. So the idea that you need thoughts, and you need clarity of thoughts, and you need creativity, and what we've learned about all of that in psychology, to your point of what worked in the 90s, by the way, I don't think it worked in the 90s. I think you didn't have enough competition to show it wasn't working in the 90s, but that's neither here nor there. But the idea that what we now know is that if you put too many hours in doing this work, your productivity goes down, period, the end. And that is not debatable. This is not something that we can argue. If you do it in a short sprint, like we were talking about in those time sensitive, you'll see an uptick. But what almost invariably happens after this, and I'll give you an example that we see in sales all the time, what invariably happens after that is the line goes below the status quo for the next couple of weeks. And so over the course of, you do that real hard for a month, and for that month you produced more. And for the next 5 months, you produced less.
Yeah.
And over 6 months, you've now produced less.
We have this tendency to overvalue immediate results and undervalue long-term outcomes in almost everything, right? Across, it's almost a part of being human. And it's worse, like it's worse here because in business now we try to measure all of these things. So like during this short sprint of overtime work, we might see the needle move on a lot of metrics, right? Like we might deliver more product functions and features, or your team might deliver more sales leads. We might see an uptick in these things. And then it reinforces in our kind of naive brain, it reinforces the fact that more work, this overtime means more results. But we don't actually look at it in context of, okay, but what happened in the 6 months after that, right? And specifically, like we can all show that productivity goes down. We just know that happens because people have to return to homeostasis in some sense. But even worse, we discount the costs associated with people leaving or people getting burnt out or anything like that. And we don't actually add up the dollars and cents of those costs in the same way that we add up the dollars and cents of a 10% increase in sales lead volume.
And let's be, software development is way ahead of sales in this realm because you guys are doing these sprints, you're doing the 1 week sprints, you're measuring it, and you're calculating the output over time, not on a week to week basis.
Yeah.
Sales is still so archaic and so behind any understanding of numbers that what we do is when you sales go up for a week, we just assume that's the new baseline. And so one of the arguments I've gotten in, and people still argue this with me, and I have no idea how, is contest and sales work. And so if we put a carrot, and let's take, we're doing transactional sales, and Monday through Friday we can make sales in that time frame. And on Friday we're going to put a carrot. And the people who make the most sales Monday through Friday get whatever that carrot is. You get a vacation, you get a bonus, you get $1,000 card, whatever it may be, right? And during that week, sales will go up. And what people don't see is sales the next 2 weeks went down. And as a sales leader, like, ooh, we need more contests. No, you moron, you don't need contests at all. You need a better system. Now, what I really like is they say, we need more contests. So they start doing it once a month. And what you're really doing is you see the first 2 weeks going into a contest, sales are way down because everyone's holding their sales. And you can see this if you look at the numbers, but the people just look at that 1 week. And to your point, like, people were really bad at looking over a 6 month period. But in sales, like, yeah, you saw the contest go up, but if you look at what happened before and after, you actually sold less shit.
Yeah.
But contests work. Yeah, contests work at giving you the answer you wanted. They don't work at increasing sales.
Yeah. That's interesting that your intuition is that sales departments are maybe further behind, but behind what? But behind agility, modernity than product development?
So my belief on this. Manufacturing went through this process in the 80s and 90s of getting the theory of constraints, getting to small batch, getting to quality in. Most successful manufacturing firms adopted that a long time ago. Software started doing it with Scrum and Agile, I'm guessing in the late 90s. I don't remember, you've taught me this, but late 90s. Sales is still using the outdated methods that says, we can still put a carrot out there and give them a crack of the stick and they'll move. And oh, by the way, we don't look at numbers over a large time frame. We look at weekly sales, monthly sales, and quarterly sales, but we compare this year's quarters to last year quarter. Did it go up? Yep. Keep doing what you're doing. They don't look at variation. We're not looking at cause and effects. We're not looking at correlation. We're not looking at how you design the system. So when I say that, that's what I'm talking about.
All right. Well, maybe there's a future in us to switch positions, and we'll try to do Scrum with the sales department, and you can try to do product with the product team. What do you think?
I think your product guys would hate me.
I know that they don't. All right, this is probably a good place to leave it. What you want to kind of sum this up for us here? Under what's the best version of asking people to work overtime?
The best version of asking people to work, the only version of asking people to work overtime where it makes sense, is if there is some time sensitivity to it. So you have a known end date, you have a known reason why that end date is relevant and impactful. You have a really good reward and individual reason why you're asking them to do it, and there's some admission of, you know what, this is on us. We know this wasn't you.
Yeah. And it's widely communicated. This isn't a request that comes down just because. This is something that we are very open about why this is occurring.
And it's not an email.
Hopefully nothing's an email. All right. I think that's a good version of the argument. And our overarching theme, though, is if you're going to do this, you also have to take into account the costs. And if you're going to measure the gains that you get out of a couple sprints of working overtime or whatever, you also have to measure the costs. That's going to be much harder because the costs are going to be more long tail, but you ought to have your eye on that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good statement. If you're gonna celebrate the success of having them work overtime, you better have total cost, not just immediate cost.
Yeah. All right, that's a good place to leave it today. I hope we can do another one of these conversations where we try to steelman an argument for things that we've heard but disagree with. And yeah, if you have any questions or have something you want us to talk about, let us know down in the comments. I've never said that before.
Now hit stop recording.
All right, smash that subscribe button.
Oh my God, I hate you.